Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha here with you, as we will be every Monday through the duration of the NBA season. Alex, as we record on Monday afternoon, and I say record because you can find this as a podcast, you can find it archived on YouTube, you can also watch it live on Twitter, you can watch it live on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube page. We always thank all the live listeners. We appreciate that. Throw some comments, some questions in the chat. We'll get to those throughout the show. But Alex, we are like 26 hours ish, 27 hours away from the official NBA opener. We have our usual 2-game set tomorrow, Tuesday night, Timberwolves, Lakers, Knicks, Celtics. We'll talk about some of our picks for those games, some of our expectations, some of what we're looking for generally, questions we want answered through the first week of the NBA season. But this is, these last couple days and even today and tomorrow are kind of the final push when it comes to fantasy drafts. I know you and I did the staff auction last week. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'm sure you touched on it on Friday, but you had your big NFBKC draft over the weekend as well.
I did. Yeah. Shout out to the NFBKC. There's still time to get your drafts in. Obviously before tomorrow. Yeah, it's a really fun league to participate in. It's super deep. And this is an interesting one because you get to try to set your own draft order. I forget exactly what that's called, right? The
KDS.
Oh yeah, KDS. So I went with a KDS of 6 and I got it.
Right.
And because my thought was I'm either going to get Halliburton or Giannis here. And that's sort of like my cutoff this year for like where I want. Ended up getting it. I took Halliburton number 1 overall.
All right. I don't have a lot of Halliburton yet this year. Somebody I would certainly like to get more of. So where'd you go after Halliburton? How did that determine your build in a league like this?
After that, I kind of doubled up and I went with LaMelo, my boy, who I've been drafting in round 2, like every draft this season. It's
you literally have LaMelo in every draft that I've been in with you. Every mock, every draft.
If LaMelo has a bad year, you will never hear from me again because I will be broke. No, I went LaMelo just because I felt like that's the upside play.
Yeah.
And then I went with my next 2 picks were Paolo Banchero and Paul George. And I think Paolo in the 3rd it's relatively early. I mean, I'm fully ready to admit that. But at the same time, I feel like, the things he doesn't do very well, threes, free throw percentage, I have that completely shored up by having LaMelo and Halliburton as my first 2 picks. And one thing, if you're going to be drafting in the NFBKC, and this is a know your league preaching moment, you got to start 2 centers, and players only qualify at one position beside, like, there are some center forward players, but there are no guard forward players. Mm-hmm. Long story short, the forward and center pool is really, really shallow at NFBKC. Yep. So, guys like Nurkic, I think I took Nurkic in the 6th round because I just needed somebody to play center, for example.
Yeah, in my league on that platform, I kind of did the same thing where you start to realize early on, especially if you're not starting, if you don't have the top 3 pick, you don't get Wembanyama or Jokic or even Anthony Davis to some extent. If you end up, I always want to get at least one center eligible player early on. So I took Şengün in round 3 after going Trae Young and Anthony Edwards, and then, didn't feel great about it, but coming back around at the end of round 4, took Jared Allen. It's like in my mind, it's like, this guy doesn't feel like he should be a 4th round pick. But it was getting to that point where, the next center eligible players off the board were DeAndre Ayton, Brook Lopez, Zach Edey, Jalen Duren, Nikola Vucevic, Nick Claxton. Like, Duren was somebody I had circled, but the way that the draft broke down, I was picking 9th. So there's, after my kind of 2 picks ish on the turn, there's a long wait until that next pick. And I was just like, man, I don't really feel great about taking Duren here. I think if I wait, there's no chance he makes it back to me, which he would not have. But it's so important to lock in those players. I think you and I have played enough on this, especially in our early days in the NFBKC, of like, I was starting some really, really ugly, second centers because you kind of forget about it if you're not used to it.
So I went 2 guards with my first 2. My next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 picks were forwards or centers. I just rattled them all off. I'm like, I need to get these guys out of the way. And then I'll backfill with guards because there's going to be guards late. I scrolled down the list. So after Paul George, I went with Jimmy Butler, Nurkic, Valanciunas. Kawhi Leonard was sitting there for me at 90. And I'm like, is someone going to do this? Because his name is at the top of the thing the whole time. I'm waiting. And I'm like, it's pick 90. I need a forward. I'm looking at the other names on the list. I'm like, these are all kind of shots in the dark to an extent. So I took them. Pick 90.
In that format, and again, to be clear, if you never played on the NFBKC, you essentially, it's a weekly lineups league, but there's like 2 lineups within the week. So I believe it's Monday through Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday are kind of a separate lineup within the week. That I don't mind. If you're in a true weekly lineup league where you have to lock it in on, say, Monday morning and it runs through Sunday, that's where I don't want to deal with the Kawhi issues, and I think we all know on a per game basis, like if Kawhi plays even 45 games, there's still a pretty decent chance he'll be a top 100 guy because he is so good per game. That's kind of been the case the last few years. I'm pretty pessimistic on his health overall, but I think it's easy to look, on our site, you could say, oh, he was, 22nd in per game and he was 75th in total value. That doesn't really factor in like the distribution of those games, of like how, like you have to kind of be lucky as far as if you're locking him into a true weekly lineup and he has a 4-game week and he only plays 1 game, you're still taking a loss there. If he plays 3, it's a win. It's just not something I want to deal with. But again, in the NFBKC, where you get the Monday through Thursday, you get the Friday through Saturday, it's a little bit easier to kind of play out the back-to-back scenarios there. I don't mind it at that point in the draft. I'm not even thinking about Kawhi, in the 40s or 50s or 60s. But if we're talking as late as you got him, I think that's acceptable.
At the NFPKC, like on the surface, it seems like this is pretty standard, but it's like you start 12 guys.
Yeah.
You have 4 bench spots, and I don't think there's an IR. So
no, there's not.
And there's almost no multi-position eligibility. So it's not an easy league to navigate. Like you got to really, you're very position sensitive, and that's the main thing I have to. So like, yeah, on one hand, it's like I can set my lineup with Kawhi. I get basically half weeks where I can set. But if he doesn't play for a month, he's just going to be sitting on my bench. And if I just rack up other injuries throughout the season, it's going to become a problem for me at some point. So it's But I picked 90. I was like, I think I can take this risk.
Yeah, you got to be super positionally conscious in the draft and on waivers too. I mean, that's something where every year in that league, even as careful as I try to be, I'm always in a situation where I'm leaving a superior player on the bench because I can't fit him into my lineup. And it's like, all right, I need this guy who's forward eligible, even though I don't want to start him. So, but yeah, that's kind of the variance that you get in fantasy basketball relative to football. Position eligibility, matters a ton, especially in that format. We got a good question here from Tony Montana, of all people, dropping in the chat. He says, do you think Brandon Miller or Miles Bridges will have a better year? I think this is a really, really good question. And I will tell you, Alex, that if I had a choice between these two, I think I'm taking Brandon Miller.
I think I'm also taking Brandon Miller. It helps that he had a really nice preseason and was just bombing fantastic from 3. Bridges obviously has the history, right? And as Michael Gonzalez says in the chat, Bridges has the higher floor. Absolutely true.
For sure.
And I don't know if Miller's assists are going to be super high. I don't know how much they're going to ask him to play make, but if he's bombing threes like that and he's just a great scorer in general, I think he'll be fine. I mean, I was a little skeptical early last year. But he showed me wrong at the end of last year, and he's been great so far. So I think I would take Miller, but they're close in ADP, and I think that's for a reason. Yeah,
they're close in ADP. They're close in our rankings. It kind of depends what type of league you're in. Most leagues you're trying to win it, obviously. We always reference the RotoWire Stake League, where it's just you want to finish in the top half, you want to avoid the payout and the penalty that comes with finishing in the bottom half. So like in that league, maybe I would favor Miles Bridges because I do agree with Michael Gonzalez. He does have a more stable floor. He's a guy that despite the off-court issues has been pretty healthy. He's played a ton of games. He played 80 games a couple of years ago. And, the off-court stuff, for better or for worse, does seem to be behind him at this point. So I think he's a little bit safer. But if you're going for an overall prize, or you're kind of, you're getting to that round 4, round 5, round 6, and you're like, man, I want to take an upside shot, I think it has to be Brandon Miller. It's tough because we saw so little of a sample of Miller with LaMelo Ball, right? It's like by the time Miller became the player that we think of him as now, like that was months after LaMelo had already essentially been done for the year.
Well, this Hornets team, these guys haven't played together that much. I mean, it's not just Brandon Miller. It's also Mark Williams, who we're still not 100% sure if he's going to be ready for opening night. It kind of doesn't seem like it, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. And obviously they're trying to work in Cody Martin and Solon. Like, is he going to play? And I'm in on Trey Mann this season. I have some Trey Mann in fantasy in our, like you mentioned, our stake league, which is a 16 team auction. I actually picked him up off of waivers because I had to put Max Strus on IR. That's the kind of deep league we're talking about right now. But I did grab him in NFBKC as LaMelo insurance as well. So yeah, this Hornets team is going to be interesting.
I've watched a lot of Hornets in the preseason so far, and they're just a fun team, man. Like, I don't think they're going to be good, but they're really fun, and they were even kind of fun. Like, the emergence of Brandon Miller made this a fun team last year, because you take LaMelo out of it, and it was kind of a blah middle of the season. But once Brandon Miller started doing what he was at the end of the year, that became really fun to watch. Win total right now for the Hornets is up to 30.5 at DraftKings, 31.5 at FanDuel. It's 29.5 at Bet Rivers. Would you entertain the over on any of those numbers? Presumably 29.5. They won 21 a year ago.
I actually would. I just, the East is not good. They're going to be playing a lot of bad teams pretty often. And even some of the good teams like the 76ers, I mean, how often are you going to actually get the 76ers when Embiid is playing and when Paul George is playing? Maybe they rest those guys against you because you're the Hornets. And so much of the record over the past couple of years has been influenced by LaMelo not playing that much. And I know there's debate, is LaMelo a winning player or not? To me, like, when you're talking about a team this bad, yes, he's a winning player. Like, having LaMelo on the court is going to help you. And if that's the thing, if we do believe Miller is good and he's going to have some sort of a leap, and then Miles Bridges is also good, then we have to think that, could this team win 35? To me, that would not be like shocking.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go to 35, but could they win like 31, 32? Yeah, I think they could get there if LaMelo stays healthy. We'll talk a little bit later in the pod about, some of the games and situations and just questions that we're kind of looking forward to getting answers from in week 1. But I will say the Hornets open up in Houston on Wednesday night. Like, that is going to be an extremely fun game. I cannot wait to watch that. They play at Atlanta on Friday. That might be like a 145 to 140 type of game. So fun early season schedule for Charlotte. But after that, though, they get Miami, Toronto, and then 2 games in a row, home back-to-back against the Boston Celtics over the weekend. So very much looking forward to that. We'll take a couple more questions here, and then we'll take a quick break. Nuno Pereira says, would you take Herb Jones over Ausar Thompson, Alex?
100% yes.
Yes, me too.
Couple different reasons for this, but the main point we have to say here is we don't, like, Ausar Thompson is not ready to play. He has not been cleared to play basketball. Correct. Because of this it's a heart issue, right?
It's a blood clot thing, I believe.
Yeah. So there's been no update on that. He could easily be out months. Like, there's just literally no clarity. So I would take Jones, because if Jones is going to start at center, quote unquote, he's going to be in the starting lineup. He ranked 84th last season.
He's good. Man.
And like, if he can maybe rack up some more blocks, get some more rebounds, I think Herb Jones could have a really nice year.
Yeah, I even if you take the blood clot thing out of it for Ausar, I still think I would go Herb Jones here. I mean, I think he's the vastly safer option. I think in category leagues, you really value the defense. Not that Ausar doesn't give you that, but I think there are further holes in his profile. And yeah, the center thing is really interesting to me, because they haven't used him at center, at least to start games in the preseason at all. They're starting Daniel Tice. We've seen some Yves Missy as well. So like, they're telling us this, and yet we haven't really seen it in these exhibitions. But either way, I mean, it makes sense. I think, Herb Jones, obviously it presents some matchup issues in terms of his size, but I don't think a team that, has playoff designs like the Pelicans do could feel great about going in with Missy and Daniel Tice. Here's another one quick. While we're on Herb Jones, Pedro says Jeremy Sochan or Herb Jones. This is easily Jones for me. I'm not a Sochan guy.
I'll say Jones, but I think there's a chance that Sochan could end up being better in points leagues if he can pass the ball a little bit. But I just don't know. Like, he averaged 3.5 assists a game last year, but they were also like, just throwing him in at point guard for half the season. And I think Sochan still has some upside, but yeah, I'm with Jones here. I think Sochan's more of like a flyer at the end of your draft, and Jones to me is like, you can take him at pick 80 to 100.
All right, we'll talk some Zach Edey in a moment. Got a couple of Zach Edey questions in the chat, but thank you for the super chat, City Bert. He says, "How do you think the Bulls' usage will be split this season?" This is on my list of questions that I want answered the first week of the season. It's honestly, it's one of the biggest questions in all of fantasy. It doesn't really matter for real life, because I don't think the Bulls will be that good. But this is a huge question. It affects Josh Giddey. It affects Kobe White, maybe the most. It affects Zach LaVine, Buzelis to some degree. Obviously, Vucevic is still hanging around there. I've been talking myself into Levine. I think he's looked good in the preseason. I got him for cheap in our auction. I still think it's possible they could move him for the right suitor. I think you saw enough out of Coby White last year that you kind of want to see that through. But obviously throwing Josh Giddey in the mix, Lonzo Ball, at least for now, is healthy and is going to be a part of this rotation. So I know this is a big question to attack, but where do we even start trying to break down the usage patterns here?
The Lonzo Ball being available does throw a bit of a wrench into things because maybe he only plays 16 to 20 minutes a game. And maybe he sits back to backs and he never plays more than 2 games in a week, but that's still going to complicate everything. And whose minutes is he taking? And also this team is so guard heavy. They have no forwards at all. I mean, Patrick Williams is, first of all, the answer to this question is that the ball is not going to Patrick Williams because he has shown no ability to eat usage. I am still kind of on I like to draft Coby White because I think he's really, really good. And I think he can basically replicate what he did last season. And I think Giddey to me is just like a pure playmaker. Yeah. So I think White and Levine can get their 20 to 25 points a game and kind of do, reach their relative ceilings. And if I have quote unquote concerns about anybody, it's probably Giddey out of this group. Like health aside for Levine, because that's a big question. I do kind of wonder, because I think Lonzo Ball is a better player than Josh Giddey. So if there are some nights where Ball is playing well, I don't know how that works out. I know it's kind of roundabout way to answer your question, but White and Levine are sort of, I think, almost the safest of this group.
Yeah, obviously it comes down to health for Levine, but I'm not going to argue on that. And I think Vucevic is still safe just because there's no other centers. It's like he's just going to, as long as they'll let him keep being Nikola Vucevic, he's going to keep doing it because there's nobody threatening his role. One thing when I was looking into this over the weekend that was interesting to me is Coby White actually had a lower usage rate after the All-Star break than he did before the All-Star break, which is surprising to me. And that tells me that even when he was playing fewer minutes early on, he was kind of being the same guy, just in less time. So I think that makes me feel a little bit better about the consistency. Obviously, you're taking a 25% usage rate guy out of the mix in DeRozan too. So there is, in theory, usage available. Now, obviously, Levine absorbs a decent chunk of that because he missed so much time last year. I've maintained, and I could be wrong about this. I hope I'm wrong because I really like the player. I'm pessimistic on Lonzo staying healthy. These type of situations, it's very Derrick Rosey to me, where it's like every time Derrick Rose would come back, you're like, all right, maybe this is the time. And there would always be a setback, and all of a sudden he's out for 2 months. I hope it doesn't go that way, but that's kind of how I'm approaching Lonzo, at least.
I think that is how you have to approach Lonzo. If you're in a 14 teamer and he's your last pick, go for it. But I think his presence is going to make things just more complicated and not be great for him individually.
Yeah. All right, before we get to some more questions, we'll talk some Zach Edey on the other side. We have a message from our friends at DraftKings Pick 6. We're thrilled to be partnering up with DraftKings Pick 6 this NBA season. And we still got a little time before opening night, but plenty of NFL options available over at Pick 6. Really been enjoying playing there each and every weekend. I think a certain quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards. How about your favorite receiver scoring a touchdown? Check out Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy football and win cash with DraftKings. Here's how it works. Just pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. For football, we're talking yards, catches, touchdowns, etc. Lock in your picks and compete against opponents for a shot to win huge cash prizes. Download the all-new DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use our code ROTOPICK. That's ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. For new Pick 6 customers, play at least $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Again, that code is ROTOPICK. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right. Thanks to our good pals at DraftKings Pick 6. We'll be bringing you a ton of Pick 6 content, plays throughout the season. You can find that over on our social channels. I know, Alex, you'll be doing some of that throughout the season as well. So we appreciate the partnership that we've had with DraftKings and specifically Pick 6. Let's talk some Zach Edey. I said we got a bunch of Edey questions in the chat. One from Slayer. He just says, thoughts on Zach Edey. Juju says, Zach Edey or Alex Sarr. My Labis says, Edey, Sarr, or Valanciunas in a 9-cat head-to-head league. So we'll just kind of start with Edey generally, Alex. I mean, I was doing a draft last week where Edey went with the 61st overall pick. That's not going to be normal, but he's certainly on the rise, right? I think you're kind of searching for anything with this rookie class. And in general, I think I like what I've seen from most of these guys. We mentioned Sochan. I think Risacher's look good. Reed Shepherd's look good. Like it's not going to be a total disaster of a class, but it's still lesser than most. But Edey's the guy for sure who is on the rise and feels like he's going to be the first rookie off the board in just about any draft.
Yeah, since Friday, Edey's highest draft position on the NFBKC was, I think, 58, if I'm reading this correctly. Well, look, Jaren Jackson is not healthy to start the season, dealing with a hamstring injury. So that could be more minutes for Edey out of the gate. In general, to me, it's just minutes, man. I wish I had like a better answer than this, because he could start and he could play 22 minutes. And then he's like barely worth rostering. He also could start and play 29 minutes and 100% pay off at pick like 60 or 70 and be sort of like a Walker Kessler type situation from when he was a rookie.
Yeah.
And it could be matchup dependent as well. If they're playing a big center, he's out there for 30 minutes. If they're playing a smaller team like the Warriors or something, he might play 18 minutes. So at what, like, do you feel like where do you feel like you want to draft Edey? If he's still on the board for you, where are you like, okay, I got to really start thinking about this?
Yeah, I think, to me, ideally it would be like maybe late round 6 at the earliest, round 7, round 8. You start to look at some of the other big men who go off the board in those rounds. Just looking at my recent NFBKC, Zubac went early round 7. Nurkic went early round 8. Then you're getting into, Valanciunas, Mark Williams, Derek Lively, Onyeka Okongwu, guys like that, Daniel Gafford. I think he absolutely belongs in that range. I think there's a case to be made that he has more upside than a lot of those guys. You bring up a really good point, though, about the matchups. And I'll be curious because it could go both ways. It's like against the Warriors, he doesn't feel like he's a good matchup, but who for the Warriors could guard Zach Edey? It's like how aggressive do they be in terms of trying to force bad matchups on other teams? And for what it's worth, looking at the early season schedule, you mentioned Jaren Jackson, by the way. He's already been ruled out Wednesday night against Utah. Yeah. So he's missing at least one game to begin the year. You get the Jazz on opening night. You get Houston, Şengün. You get Orlando over the weekend, and then Chicago with Vucevic. Most teams I feel like do have not a classic like Al Jefferson type of center, but they have like somewhat of a true center. Like I don't think there are that many spots where you would say, oh, Edey can't be out there.
Pelicans. I think Orlando.
Yeah. Well, make Herb Jones guard him.
Right, exactly. Well, no, I think against Orlando will be interesting. That's sort of the first time where it's like, okay, what are they going to do here? But I would love if they were like, hey, we're going to make these small teams pay. We're going to throw the ball to Edey. He's going to shoot his 11-foot jump hooks. He's going to drop step, just force it.
Well, that's the thing. When you watch, these preseason games or you watch his highlights, like it's not like it's just lobs or, he's grabbing offensive rebounds. Like they are dumping it down to him in the post. And he is, he's doing the old kind of lean back, look around, clear out, like making one-on-one post moves. He was abusing Isaiah Jackson for the Pacers last week. Like that, I felt bad for Isaiah Jackson. Like he put him in the rim a couple of times. And those are the type of guys. Like Jackson's a good shot blocker, but he's what, 6'8"? It's like Zach Edey has 6 inches, if not more. He's got like 8 inches on him. Like there aren't that many teams that have a Zach Edey matchup. So again, there's enough other options in Memphis that it's not just going to be run things through Zach Edey. But it feels like they are making a point to kind of utilize him as a post player, not just a big guy who just kind of runs around and grabs offensive boards. Edey or Sarr? To me, this is pretty easily Edey.
I would take Edey, but I actually think this is closer than the ADP would suggest. Because if like there is the situation where maybe Edey plays about 24 minutes a game, let's call that like median. And if Sarr's playing 33, 34 minutes a game, and Sarr's pretty good on defense, that's like right now it's his calling card, compared to his offense. So if he can also block a shot and a half or 2 shots a game, that's going to fly him up the leaderboards. I don't know if you get to 2. That's maybe aggressive.
I don't think so.
In a points league,
maybe.
In a points league, it could easily be Sarr, just because it might just be a volume of shots, rebounds, the percentage doesn't matter kind of a thing.
Here's a good one. Kevin Porter Jr. or Brandin Podziemski? Who would you rather draft?
This is so tough. This is such a good question. This is how you know we're like really approaching the season. I don't know what the Warriors are doing with their rotation. Like, they have so many guards. They got Melton, they got Podziemski, they got Healed, obviously Curry, and part of Moses Moody just signed a contract extension for like $10 million a year for 3 or 4 years. So I don't know what they're doing in their backcourt. Like, all the talk has been Podziemski's going to be out there. He's firing threes. I've liked what I've seen from Podziemski in the preseason. I think Podziemski's the safer pick. Even if their rotation does have some questions to me. But Porter, Clippers need playmakers, man. Like, aside from Harden and Norman Powell, and Powell's more of just a pure scorer, they need someone out there, especially when Kawhi is going to miss, and Kawhi is out indefinitely. It sounds like a suspension still might be coming for KPJ. We haven't heard anything. Like, there's been no update on that. He's been playing in the preseason and he's looked great, but it's looming over. It could happen. You might draft him. He might get suspended for 25 games.
Yep, that's the fear with me. And there's been whispers out there. I know some Clippers reporters have said, the Clippers are expecting a suspension, but the season starts tomorrow and we haven't heard anything. So I don't know what would possibly be delaying this at this point. I still think that, like, they have similar upside to me in some ways, because Podziemski is like a sneaky, maybe better fantasy player than he is even in real life, because he rebounds so well as a guard. And if you're a Steph Curry pessimist in terms of how many games he plays, there could be a big chunk of the year where Podziemski is like kind of the number 1 option, number 2 option with Kuminga. So I personally would go Podziemski. The Clippers to me are just kind of a mess. But Kevin Porter has been a pretty decent fantasy player, and I don't think he's lost that necessarily. And the minutes should be there by default. They're going to need Kevin Porter to be as competitive as they can. But for me, I would lean Podziemski. Michael Mendez says, is Kelly Oubre a must draft in 9-cat leagues?
I would call him a must draft, but that team is really shallow, and they're going to need somebody to score the ball when Paul George and Embiid are hurt, because they got nobody else besides Maxey. Yeah. And even when those guys are in, still a shallow team. Do you trust Eric Gordon to stay healthy? How good can Jared McCain be out of the gate? Caleb Martin, Buzelis, these guys are not scorers. So draftable, not a must draft.
Yeah, it depends how deep your league is, but somebody I'm always happy to get. It's like every year there's always some caveat with Oubre. It's like, oh, he's going to see a reduction in minutes, and like every year he somehow has like a stretch where he averages 20 and 5, and looks really good and hits a bunch of threes. So I'm always happy to roster him. And I think you're right about Paul George is going to miss time. I mean, Oubre could end up starting for them anyway at the 2 a lot of nights, so totally fine drafting him in the late rounds. Let's see. Brian says 12-team, 9-cat. 13-man rosters. He has to keep 2, and he's punting free throws because he has Luka. So he has to keep 2 of the following players, I believe: Kevin Porter, Trace Jackson-Davis, John Collins, Grady Dick.
Is this a keeper league?
Presume either that or he's got to trim down the roster. I don't know.
I would drop Grady Dick, drop him for sure. I don't have faith in him. The rest of these guys, I think, have shown like top 100 upside. Assuming you agree, do you have another guy on that list that you're just kind of like, is it KPJ just because like there's just too much volatility around it?
Yeah, maybe. These are really tough. They're all pretty close to me. I mean, like John Collins was like basically was like the 95th best player last year, and like for some reason kind of avoided the shutdown for most of the year. So I actually kind of like him. Yeah, Grady Dick, I mean, he's looked good in the preseason. That's been interesting to me. I wonder, like, the 3-point volume hasn't been that high. Like, he had that big game last week and he only took a handful of threes. So it's like there might be a disconnect as far as, the value of those points versus how many threes he's taking. Barrett and Quickly and Barnes are going to be soaking up a bunch of usage there. So if it is a keeper league, I'm pretty intrigued by Grady Dick long term. But I think he might have the lowest upside of the 4 this season. But those are all pretty close. Let's see what else we have here. Would you take Ivica Zubac or Mark Williams? Cheers from Portugal. Thank you, Nuno, for the question.
Interesting. Mark Williams has more upside. but he's hurt right now, and he's just got a really bad injury history, and the Hornets are terrible about injury reporting, so I really don't know how hurt he is. And I think Zubac, we've talked about it on the podcast, but this is about as good of a setup as he's ever had to have the best season of his career, just in terms of like they could feed it to him in the post more. Harden's going to run the offense, pick and roll. So I think I would actually lean Zubac this season.
Yeah, me too. This is easy Zubac for me. I mean, you pencil him in for like 75 games every year. The numbers aren't that dissimilar. You know, it's like Mark Williams, like his highs are higher, but he's even when healthy the last couple of years, he's barely got to a block per game. Like he's not this high volume shot blocker by any means, despite his size and his relative athleticism. Zubac also a better free throw shooter. Zubac gives you better field goal percentage. So even if Mark Williams is healthy, I don't really think there's that big of a gap between these two. And Zubac is just infinitely more reliable. We got another super chat here. Thank you, City Bert. He says, "Could Drummond average 15 and 15 if he gets 36 minutes?"
Only 15 rebounds. I'll give you the wait. Don't look right now. I'll give you the over under Drummond preseason per 36 rebounds 20 and a half over or under.
This is what he's averaged in the preseason
per 36
minutes. It's got to be over. The way you're phrasing it has to be over.
21.9 per 36 for Andre Drummond. Yes, he can average 15 and 15 if he gets 36. 100%. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we could see some like Yabusele at center. Yeah, obviously the question is implying, Embiid's going to miss. But Embiid, I mean, credit to Embiid for basically saying like, yeah, don't expect too much from me this year. I'm not going to be playing a ton of games.
If you draft Embiid, you should absolutely draft Drummond also. Like the handcuff, we don't do it that much in fantasy basketball. I think you should get Drummond earlier than ADP would suggest if you also have Embiid on your roster.
Yeah, it's a very rare obvious handcuff in fantasy basketball, but you're totally right about that. I would jump ADP, but like you're going to be happy that you have Andre Drummond, especially if you have Embiid. And even if you don't have Embiid, I think there's going to be a lot of weeks where you're like, wow, I can't believe I got Andre Drummond for $1 in this auction, and he's given me 18 and 24 over a 5-game span. Let's see. In a points league, Brian MC says, would you pick up Risacher, Oubre, Keldon Johnson, or Wiggins? We'll assume this is Andrew Wiggins.
Got to be between Oubre and Keldon Johnson. And I would actually, I don't know if I have a preference between Oubre and Keldon Johnson. Maybe Keldon, but it's close between for me on those two.
I think it's Keldon Johnson to begin the year, and then once Vassell is back, I would try to transition that to Oubre. But yeah, in a points league, those guys are pretty equal to me. With Risacher, it's like I think he's easily the most intriguing of this group, but a lot of the perceived value will likely come from threes, and in points, obviously that's a little bit diminished. Brandon Miller or Kelly Oubre? This is Brandon Miller for me easily.
Yeah, 100% Brandon Miller.
Yep. Chris G says, what is your opinion on RJ Barrett in a 9-category league? If you're new here, 9-category, basically the normal 8 categories, but you're including turnovers. He says RJ Barrett played well for the Raptors last year and is going after round 10 in most of his drafts.
Yeah, this is sort of where you have to, like, this can be league specific and team specific, because like the things Barrett is bad at, like he doesn't hit that many threes. His free throw percentage is kind of bad, gets no defensive stats. Now, if you have all those things shored up, go ahead and draft Barrett, because he's going to get you your 20 points, your 5 rebounds, your 3 assists. I think once you're after pick 100, you can just go ahead and take him. Like, there's just not that many guys available who are going to play 30 to 35 minutes a game and give you a relatively like just good stat line with 20 points per game. So I think he's on the table after that.
Thoughts on Deni, Avdija, and Cam Thomas? Good question here from Axel. I think the Cam Thomas thing is pretty straightforward. It's going to be a lot of points. He's a reasonable rebounder for his size. The assist rate has actually increased each of the last 3 years, so it'll give you a little bit there. Pretty good field goal percentage for a guy who takes an incredible number of wildly difficult shots. Like, he still shoots like 45%, and a very, very good free throw shooter on high volume. So in roto leagues, I've been pretty in on Cam Thomas. What do you think about Avdija?
I have mixed feelings on Avdija because I think he's really good. And Chauncey Billups did say he was the best. He was like playing the best on the whole team the other day.
I did see he walked that back, by the way. He was then like, yeah, I never said that. So mixed, I guess mixed reviews so far from his own head coach.
like if you guaranteed me Avdija was going to see 30 minutes a game, like draft him in the top 100, draft him around pick 100, that's fine with me because he's so well-rounded. My problem is like this Blazers rotation, despite this team projecting to be the worst team in the West, it's just dense, just a dense rotation, and I don't really know what they're going to do. To me, I'm cool taking a bet on the talent again, drafting around pick 100. It's fine. It's just he was in a better situation last year on the Wizards. That's how I'll put it.
I've got a couple questions about Josh Hart. Jay LaFleur says, is Josh Hart's preseason a red flag? Now, Josh Hart has played 4 preseason games. He started 3 of those. He's averaging about 23 minutes per game. He's taking 1.5 shots per game in that span. He's only giving you 4 rebounds per game too, which for Josh Hart, not that great. Are you concerned by this small sample of preseason?
A little bit. I think people's expectations of Josh Hart have kind of gotten out of control. And not in a bad way. It's just he's played so well recently. Like he had that stretch in Portland, and then he comes to the Knicks and he gets a bunch of minutes because the team is injured, and then he's playing really well and he's doing everything. Like he's 100% deserved the praise he's gotten and how well he's played. But he is the 5th option in the starting 5. And yeah, Towns is going to be stealing rebounds from him. Anunoby's a solid rebounder. I think the only thing that saves Hart here is like this is one of the thinnest teams in the league, if not the worst bench in the entire NBA, to be honest. And he might just have to play 36 to 40 minutes a game, and he may touch the ball a lot with the second unit. Yeah, it's just you can draft him, but I wouldn't draft him until like, maybe the close to the end of your draft, like back 2 picks.
I think something we have to keep in mind. So first 41 games of last season for Josh Hart. So we're basically talking the first half, 28 minutes per game, 7.3 points, 6.4 rebounds, 2.7 assists. He shot 32% from 3 on low volume. He only took about 6 field goal attempts per game. Like I think that's, that was his first half last year. I think that could be his first half this year. There's kind of more mouths to feed, even though you're taking Randall out of the mix. Now, like you said, if Bridges goes down or, Brunson goes down or whoever, anybody really, there's going to be more opportunity there, but he's the ultimate role player. That's why we love Josh Hart. That's why the Knicks love Josh Hart. Like it's great to get kind of the out of position rebounds, but he's never really been elite in any other category.
No. Yeah. It's, this will be an interesting year for him. He's not a must draft player, I would say.
All right. We'll hit a couple more of these quickly. Oliver Overe says, I think Schroeder will be a sleeper pick. Ended up getting him as my last pick. Totally on board with that. The Nets have nobody. I've been loading up on Schroeder as well.
Yeah. I don't know how Ben Simmons is going to affect things, but they just have so few playmakers that I think Schroeder is a decent flyer, especially if you need assists late. Cam Johnson had a big game the other day. I think he's going a little too late ADP wise. Yeah.
I got Devin Vassell for $6, but obviously he is hurt. Do you guys think he's worth the invest and stash?
Yeah, if you have an IR, sure, 100%. If you don't, it's going to be a little tough, but $6, assuming you're talking a standard $200 auction budget, I have no problem with that.
Okay, kind of piggybacking off of that, John Ramos says, would you drop Middleton if Paul George and Devin Vassell are already in your IL spots? Presumably you only have 2, 12-team league. So would you drop Middleton? Or would you drop Vassell?
It's too early. I mean, like, do you not have room on your bench at all? That'd be my question. Like, I would not be dropping guys this early if you don't necessarily need the bench space.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something to keep in mind. That's something you've done a good job of harping on, especially in our auction leagues, as far as building a super balanced team, 1 through 16, as opposed to maybe investing a little bit more in those true starting spots or the guys that you expect to start for you 90% of the time. And, the amount of value that you can end up leaving on your bench.
If you drop Middleton, someone's going to pick him up because Middleton might, like, he's not playing on opening night. He might play like 10 days from now. And then 10 days after that, he might play 30 minutes and put up 20 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. And you're going to be like, I dropped him for Kevin Porter Jr., who got suspended for 25 games. So I would just hang on to Middleton if you can.
Torad Taylor, I hope this is the Tyrod Taylor, the NFL quarterback. He says, would you draft Matas Buzelis or Alex Sarr?
I would take Sarr. I feel more confident that he'll see 30 plus minutes a game, good defensive upside. I do think Buzelis could have some nice moments this year because the Bulls are so thin at forward.
Yeah.
So if I would say last pick in your draft, go ahead, take a chance on Buzelis.
Yeah, I would say like I've taken Buzelis in a few leagues, and it's like I wouldn't be surprised if I end up dropping him a couple weeks in and he's shooting like 28% from the field. But there will be a time that he's going to impact the season. It might not be until later in the year, but that dude plays really hard. He is going to do his best to defend. Like I think he's going to be fairly high usage. Like I think he believes he's like the best rookie in this class, and that matters for something, especially this year. All right, we'll do a few more here. What is your thought on Malcolm Brogdon as the last pick in a 9-category, 12-team league?
Do it. I would do it. He's hurt. I would do it. I think I took him in a league, even though he's got that thumb injury. With my last pick, maybe it doesn't pay off for you, but it's the last pick. And if he plays 28 minutes a game, that should pay off for as long as he does.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. I'm not a Brogdon guy, but the options at that point in the draft are pretty limited. Nuno says, thoughts on Harden, Desmond Bane, and Lillard. Lillard fell to 37 in my league.
Whoa.
Yikes, dude. Great if you got him at 37. That's fantastic. I mean, Lillard, last year felt like a worst case scenario, and he was still a second round value. I think Dame has plenty left in the tank. He openly admitted that he didn't play basketball all last summer. I think that's probably a bad thing. I think he's going to be really good. Obviously 37 is insane. You're not going to see that anywhere.
No, I think Lillard is firmly a second round pick, maybe like a late second round in fantasy. Thoughts on Harden? If you're on the turn, I think you have to consider it. The 12-13 turn in a standard league, just because I think he has first round upside this year. And on Bane, I think we could just kind of expect like the usual from Bane, like maybe quietly one of the most boring fantasy players, even though he's like had pretty good year last year despite getting hurt. But draft him in that like 40 range and just expect what we got last year or the year before.
Jalen Johnson or Jalen Williams? This is a really good question from Shaz. He says he's punting field goal percentage, although I don't know that really matters because both these guys are good field goal percentage players. So I think we can just kind of evaluate this straight up. Jalen Johnson or Jalen Williams?
I would say Jalen Williams, just because I think he's going to handle the ball more and be asked to he may be asked to run the second unit a lot, even though obviously he's going to play with the stars too. But I just like his upside as a defender, as a playmaker, just everything. I think Jalen Williams is just fantastic. But they're fairly close in fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what else we have here. Would you draft Hachimura? Is there any upside? I have, he's like my least favorite player in the NBA, so I'm biased. I cannot answer this. Do you have any thoughts?
I think his upside is entirely tied to the health of Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Full disclosure, I took him with my second to last pick in NFBKC, but that's a league where forward is really thin and it's deep rosters, and I just needed stability. I would only draft him probably in a standard 12 if I had LeBron or Edey on my team. Then I think you could draft him as like a light handcuff, I would say.
All right, dude. I'm staying away. I'm done with that, man. Speaking of handcuffs, would you trade Herro for Beal? Our question asker says he has KD, so in theory that would give him some insurance.
Only because you have KD, I would consider it. Otherwise, it'd be a complete stay away from me. And I think I would just rather have Herro. Herro is just better at this point and is a better fantasy player, and I think a better real life player at this point. I know Herro has his own injury history, but he's also 24 as opposed to Beal, who's in his 30s. So I would stick with Herro. That's gut feeling. But if you really want the insurance, it's not a bad trade.
How are we feeling about Norman Powell to start the Clippers season? I'll tell you, I love Norman Powell. I have a ton of Norman Powell. I think he's been really throughout his entire career, super underrated, just a guy who has been really, really consistent. He's had a ton of different roles. Sometimes he's starting, sometimes he's a sixth man. He's 2 years removed from averaging 17 points per game and shooting 40% from three on pretty high volume. I think there's a strong trickle down effect for all these Clippers that we've talked about. And I think he's going to be, I wouldn't say a league winner by any means, because he doesn't have that kind of upside. But, you look at some of the other guys who go in his range, and like he's always the guy who stands out to me. So I really like Powell this year.
Powell has top 100 upside. I don't think you have to draft him inside the top 100. I think you could draft him at like 120, 110 if you're being aggressive and like you want him. But I 100% agree. Like, he's going to have to score for this team because not that many other guys are doing it. And Kawhi's health is obviously a concern.
Okay, we'll hit a few more and then we got to get out of here. Alex, this is a Barutha question. Dyson Daniels, Noah Clowney, or Bilal Coulibaly?
Oh my God. Okay, I'll say Daniels, because I think Daniels can basically do everything that Coulibaly does, but he's better at it. I think we've completely forgotten Dyson Daniels. I think was the 8th overall pick.
Yeah,
really strong defender. Like, defense is Daniels' calling card, and he gets defensive deflections. Coulibaly's defense is his calling card, but he doesn't get as many deflections. Whether Daniels starts or not, I think he can see about 30 minutes a game. Maybe Coulibaly sees the same, but I really like Daniels. Better point guard, or like better playmaker than Coulibaly as well. Clowney, I like Clowney, but they do not seem to be committed to playing him high 20s minutes coming into the season. If Dorian Finney-Smith did not exist, the answer to this question could easily be Clowney. And picking Clowney now may pay off in February, but I don't know if I want to wait that long. So I think Daniels is my guy here.
Got a couple Steph Curry questions we can address together. One asks Stephen Curry or Kyrie Irving in a category league. And the other is, would you trade Curry for Ja Morant?
Okay, so I would take Curry over Kyrie, but I'm like, I almost never draft Kyrie. He goes too early for my blood, considering the games he misses. And it's not a personal absence thing. Like, he just gets hurt often and has throughout his entire career. Curry's obviously old, but we talked about the Warriors earlier. Like, what are they doing on offense? It might have to be a big Curry year. Obviously, there's injury downside, age downside. Trade Curry for Ja in a points league? Maybe. Yeah. In a points league, you can consider that. In categories, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's tough because all these guys are risky for different reasons, right? I mean, Kyrie, Ja, Curry, Kyrie and Ja are younger. Ja obviously being by far the youngest, but they're, off-court stuff aside, he's missed a ton of time as well. Like you said, Kyrie, it kind of feels like he's moved past all the flat earth stuff or whatever. But even going back to his Cleveland and Boston days, like, guy's always been banged up. It's like he's not any safer to me than Curry, even given Curry's age. And I think as long as Curry could get to 60 games, is that enough of a cutoff? Like, I think the production for Curry is going to surpass those guys enough that even if you're pretty pessimistic about him breaking down, I still think he's worth it. And, Curry's the guy that you're the most scared to trade away, I think, of that group too. Like, there's going to be nights where you're like, oh my God, he went 9 of 13 from three. What am I doing?
100%. And it's tough. I mean, so many guys in this first round, like picks 1 to 15, have injury concerns. Like, half the guys in this range were like, all we need him to do is play 65 games and it's worth it. Yeah. So it's like a lot of these guys are in that boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got a question about, Tatum or AD. If you're picking in the mid first round, I go Tatum. I'm betting that the health falls back off for AD. Last year was best case, and he was fantastic, and he's got the higher upside, no question, but it's just, what are the chances that he plays 75 games again? I would say probably not very good. Is Lauri Markkanen a good 4th or 5th round pick?
4th or 5th round? Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously there's the worries about, like, is Utah going to tank? Are you going to get screwed in March and April? Possibly, but he's so talented that he could finish as like the 20th ranked fantasy player. And if you get him in the 5th round, sometimes you just got to eat the risk. Yeah.
I mean, weird fantasy profile kind of, because it's really just points, rebounds, and percentages and threes. So you're not, you're getting almost no assists. You're really, if you're depending on him for blocks or steals, good luck. Those aren't really going to be there. So he's somebody that I've kind of struggled with in the past, because especially if you go with well-rounded players early on, I think Markkanen's kind of somebody that might dictate how you build your category team the rest of the way. But yeah, I mean, 4th or 5th round, he's totally fine. Dyson Daniels or Scottie Pippen Jr. in a 14-team category league. This is Daniels for me.
Daniels, I'm just not sure. Like Pippen's shown some interesting stuff. He did last year. I just don't know if he's going to see enough minutes.
I mean, it took like the most catastrophic injury season of all time for him to show that. And if that happens again, then yeah, he's the answer. But you know, there's enough in front of him as far as Bane, Smart, Ja, even Kennard, Vince Williams, you know, guys like that. Like it can't be as bad as it was last year. So I'm pretty intrigued by Dyson Daniels. I think there's a much clearer path to him seeing enough minutes to be relevant in Atlanta than there is for Scottie Pippen. Is Tobias Harris considered the second option in Detroit? Thoughts on his upside?
I think this entirely depends on how good Jay and Ivy can play.
Yeah.
If Ivy's preseason is an indication of what he can do this season, then Ivy will be the second option and Tobias Harris will be the third option. If Ivy kind of still is who he has been, then Tobias Harris is just better than him on offense.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to say that. So thoughts on Harris's upside? I mean, I don't think I would draft him any sooner than like the 50th, 55th pick. Yeah, it's just Cade's going to run that offense.
I think there's a world in which Ivy could technically be the number 2 option. It would be close, but I still think Harris will be the better fantasy player. If that makes sense.
Sure.
You know, I mean, like, especially in a category league with the percentages, I mean, he has a massive advantage there. Like Jaden Ivey's not a high field goal percentage guy. He's not a good free throw shooter for a guard. Tobias Harris, you know, he's basically been like a, I don't know, 50, 38, 88 guy for the last 10 years.
He's in like the Covington zone for like fantasy players where it's just like this his floor is so high. Like he just, it doesn't matter where he's playing, what condition he plays in. He's just going to rank 60th no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, he's been wildly consistent for multiple different teams, multiple different situations. He's played with high usage guys. He's been kind of more the man on some teams and he always finishes in the same range. So I'm actually pretty confident that he'll be a decent investment this year. And I think the only risk would be, you know, a shutdown late in the year, but that's kind of a cross that bridge when you get there. I don't worry too much about that with guys that I'm drafting in that range. All right. We'll do 2 more and then we're out of here. Jalen Suggs is available on waivers. Should I pick him up over Lonzo?
100%. Yes. 100%. Jalen Suggs could be a top 100 player. Like he should be a top 100 player.
Yeah. Yeah. Enough said on that one. And then we got some Dalton Connect questions. Should I pick up Sochan and drop Castle, Lonzo Ball, or Connect? And then we got another Connect question. He says, would you draft Dalton Connect considering the Lakers B2B? How many minutes do you expect he'll play? I've been pretty mild on Connect. I know he was awesome in the preseason last week. You know, had that huge game that forced overtime and then kind of took that home for them. We'll see. I would be very surprised, you know, if he's doing that in the regular season. You know, I think he's going to struggle to see enough minutes, I think, to be relevant. He's going to have to be, you know, super high volume when he's out there. You know, maybe it takes an injury to Austin Reeves or Rui or somebody like that. Like, I mean, if you watch Connect at Tennessee, like he was the guy. He did everything for that team. Like he was ball in the hands. Like he almost has a little Luka to him. Like the way he moves reminds me of Luka, the kind of the little hop before the release. But he's just not going to see that kind of role with the Lakers. And he's a very good shooter, obviously, but he's more comfortable as like a break you down off the dribble, step back shoot, as opposed to like Kyle Korver catch and shoot, right? Like just because he's like an American white guy, he's not like this catch and shoot sniper. He could be a very good shooter, but he's not Klay Thompson, you know? So I think there's going to be an adjustment process for him going from being the dude at Tennessee to being like the 6th option for the Lakers.
Yeah, to me, he doesn't really have enough upside for the Lakers back-to-back to really be worth it in daily leagues. I would just rather take a flyer on someone who I think has more upside. Like I would rather have Jonathan Isaac than Dalton Connect, even if you're just trying to win week 1. You know what I mean? I don't remember what the second question was. It was about potentially picking up Sochan for Ball or Connect or Castle. I would drop Connect or Ball to pick up Sochan. I think that's fine.
Okay. 2 more quick ones. Sorry, I keep adding to this, but these are good questions. Is Reed Shepherd worth holding on to this early in the season? I would say yes, unless you're in a very shallow league. I'm excited about his upside. I think that can only grow as the year goes along. Do you have anything on Shepherd?
I would say just give it 2 weeks. If he's playing 16 minutes a game, you can drop him. If he's playing 23 minutes a game, just hold on as long as you can.
We are getting a strong uptick in Al Horford questions as well. So we got to hit one of these. Thoughts on drafting Al Horford? 9-cat, 12-team league. He's getting close to like the Udonis Haslem zone for me. I know he's still playing really well. But if you're in a weekly lineups league, it's going to be tough. He's not going to play back-to-backs. He didn't play back-to-backs last year. Played a lot more in the postseason, obviously, and without Porzingis early on, he's going to have a role. I don't know. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm trying to look at what percentage of his shots came from three last year. It was high. It was like 65% of his shots were coming from beyond the arc. So he's weirdly now this like threes and blocks guy as a center. And he was down to 1 block per game last year in 26 minutes. I think ideally he's not playing 26, 27 minutes per game this year.
Right. I think like his best case scenario is per game he ranks like 80th, but like he's going to sit every back to back. I don't even know if he's going to play the 26 minutes. I think it should be an indication that the Celtics have Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman and Neemias Queta. And I wouldn't be surprised if they tried maybe a little bit more, take him at the 5 this year. I think they're going to just run. I think they're going to try to preserve Horford as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
If he's there for you with your last pick and you need a center, if you're in a 2-center league, if you're in a daily lineups league, I don't hate it. But if you're in like a 1-center weekly lineup league, it's not worth it.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Great questions all around. Keep those coming. Every Monday, Alex and I will be doing this throughout the NBA season. I will be back tomorrow, Tuesday morning, with Brandon Kravitz. You can feed us more questions there. We'll have Mike Barner and Kieran Sprecher on the pod on Wednesday. Alex, you'll be back on Friday with Ken and Shannon. So 4 episodes per week all season long. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, DraftKings Pick 6. They've been a great partner to us for a long time. Make sure you go check out DraftKings Pick 6. If you need to see the offer again, just rewind the pod, rewind the video. You can go check it out there. Want to thank Vivid Seats as well. Use that promo code ROTOWIRE for $20 off your first $200 purchase. Enjoy opening night, guys. Like I said, we'll be back Tuesday morning. So we'll have one, kind of our final thoughts on opening night from myself and Mr. Kravitz tomorrow. But we are getting there, man. I'm so excited. 2-game slate coming at us, and then the huge Wednesday night slate. The NBA is almost here.